New videos every day.
Life, wisdom. I'm Psychetruth Correspondent Corrina Rachel, and today on the Truth Talks, I'm continuing my conversation with Dr. Vincent Bellonzi. Today we're going to discuss genetics and the role that genetics play in our health. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me again.
So my question is, we hear a lot of times people will say, oh, because of my genetics, I can't lose weight, or I have a disease because of my genetics. Can you maybe tell us how much our genetics are really to blame for the state of our health and the state of our body?
It's not so much genetics. It's something I'm going to talk about in just a minute called epigenetics that may even play more of a picture. Your genes are there as a reference book. I want you to think of it that way. So depending on how you reference a book and what you do with it, you're going to get different results, right? People could even get different interpretations. That's what happened. In fact, some scientists have called it your book of life, your DNA. And when they first tracked the DNA, they found that it was a sequence of bases, and they mapped it out with the aid of computers. And when computers came into the picture, we could actually do that. And they were hoping to find monogenetic diseases. Basically, the idea was, well, we can find a gene for the disease, and then we're going to use something called nanotechnology. We're going to go in and alter those genes, and we'll eradicate disease. It didn't work. In fact, to some extent, the whole idea of studying genetics was considered a failure for a short time. It's not, but we had to kind of rethink things. What they found was that there's a sequence, of course, and it's read by the body in trying to make proteins or to do other operations. But it can be read differently depending on how you live your lifestyle. So even places that are very conservative are saying that at least 50% of the picture is actually your lifestyle, what you choose to do from day to day. And other researchers are actually saying it's as high as 80 to 90% of the picture is not genetics, but your lifestyle. In fact, MD Anderson, if you know, is a very big cancer center, world known, and they did a few studies, and the conclusions of their studies actually said that when it comes to the incidence of cancer, the lifestyle factors actually play 80% of the picture. They said that. And this is a very conservative, cancer research center.
Right.
But that comes up a lot in the research, that there's a lot to do, and it has to be considered now. Even geneticists have to consider the epigenetics. And epi means above or around. So basically the environment the genes are in. And that has to do with your nutrition, with your exercise, with how much stress you're under, with how much you sleep. So lifestyle factors tend to create a different interpretation, let's say, of that book. And your ancestors can be blamed if you want to blame somebody. But it's not because they gave you a book. It's because of the way they read the book. And now, instead of just a sequence of genes, they've actually found that there's something called junk DNA, which they didn't know what it did before, which is why they called it junk. Now they're regretting that. But they found that the junk DNA is actually comprised of genetic marks. Basically, your ancestors figured out how to survive. And they marked up the book like, okay, read this section, do this one this way, this one that way, and they were able to have you. Well, if you follow their same pathway, you'll get somewhat the same results. If you don't, you won't. So if your ancestors didn't have all the snack foods around to eat, you're probably going to get a little different response to those foods. Does that make sense? So it's epigenetics that really causes what we call the genetic expression. Your results come from how you live your life and how you interpret the book. So you can't just say, I have a problem because my parents have the problem. You have to identify how they lived their life and how people before them did, and then consider the way that you're living your life. So the good news there is you can actually play a part in not having or experiencing a disease. No, you don't have to be overweight or obese because it's in your genetics, because it's not. They've been looking for the fat gene for now 15 years and they haven't found it. And even diseases that used to be considered to be only, say, one gene variation, they're finding it's several variations that have to be put together in the right sequence with the right exposure, and then you can have the disease or not. So it's really more to it than just saying, well, it's fate that I have this thing because it's in my genes. Yeah, there's a section in your genes where you could do that, but you don't have to.
Right.
So, especially things like diabetes, a lot of people assume that, oh, I'm going to be diabetic because my parents are. Well, no, that's not true.
If you follow the same
If you do everything they did,
and do
you know
the same
how to do
things,
it. But if you take a different path, if you do things a little bit differently, if you watch your sugars, exercise, very likely you won't have diabetes.
So you could kind of maybe say that your genetics are the blueprint
Yes.
for the house, and then through our daily life, the way that we live, what we eat, we're actually putting in the insulation, putting in
Very
the
good,
walls, and
yeah.
that's going to determine whether our house ends up being able to stand up or whether that
whether
house
it's condemned, yes.
Very interesting. So I think that that's a very important point. Can you maybe go a little bit more into this concept of epigenetics and this idea that we have a significant amount of control on how our genetics end up being expressed and how our body ends up looking or feeling?
Well, think of it this way. Your body has never made a mistake, ever. Even though people think that it does. It's only trying to keep up with your lifestyle. Your body is constantly adapting. Now, we used to think adaptation took mutations and evolution. Evolution does take time. You've got to have several different generations and all that. But adaptation can happen practically overnight. Your body will adapt to something new. Say you exercise in a different way, you get an adaptation. Well, if I am paying attention to that, if I put the right stresses, let's say, if I exercise in the right way, if I eat in the right way, I'll get a particular adaptation. So I am actually determining what my expression is going to be. So if you look at it that way, that your body is not making mistakes, it is just adapting to your life, then you can see how much control that you have. And that's all epigenetics is the experience of your book and you. They've even done studies where they found changing one or two factors could make a huge change. There's a very famous study now because of this on mice. And they were using something called a Goody mouse. And this mouse pretty reliably will be sick. You can grow tumors on it. It'll be diabetic. It'll be obese. It's white. It doesn't have any color, and it was bred for that. But they were looking at some nutrient changes in some of these mice, and they happened to add some folate in one of the studies, and they found that just the change in that one nutrient, they started getting these litters with brown mice that were smaller and healthier, and you couldn't get them sick.
Wow!
They changed one factor, and you got a completely different animal. So that's opened up a lot of research saying we really do have a lot of influence over those genes.
Certainly. So one of the things that's been really standing out to me, especially in my own journey of weight loss and nutrition and trying to help other people in those areas, is recognizing that really everybody has a different optimal diet or different things that they need. They have different, some people can handle different foods where, I think the saying is one person's food is another person's poison.
You're speaking epigenetics.
So yeah, and so you get this sensation that certainly our genetics are playing a big role in our bodies and the different foods that we need and the different nutrients that we need. But I think it's really interesting the way that you're explaining that it's not just a matter of your genetics say this, and so you will always have this response, that really we do have a good amount of control over what ends up actually being our state of health.
Yes. I mean, there's some general things we can assume. I don't know anybody that's adapted to certain processed foods. I mean,
Right.
It seems to affect everybody negatively. But yeah, to say that there's one diet for everybody, it's not been my experience in years and years of working with people. You're going to have to tailor the diet to you. Some people can, in fact, tolerate, say, gluten or dairy or something like that, but many people can't. Some people do better with a paleo-type approach, where they're not consuming more than vegetables, a little bit of fruit, and some good protein. Other people have the genetics to be able to handle many of the dairy and other products. But it has to do with as well as far as some people probably do well with less vegetable intake, some people need more. So you're right. You've got to find and tailor a diet that makes your body operate as good as you can. And again, it's a doable thing. It just takes a little bit of paying attention. And when you hit the right mix, you're there, you feel it, you know it, everything's good.
So for the people who have maybe been on a diet for a really long time, or they feel like they've been dieting their whole lives, they exercise a lot, they're doing everything that they know of, and they've just kind of come to this conclusion that it must be my genetics. I'm doing everything I can. It must just be some force that is forcing me to not be able to lose weight. What maybe suggestions would you give to someone like that, or tips could you
First of all,
offer?
take a deep breath and relax. Because there's hope. It's just that they haven't gotten that right mix yet. And I've worked with many people where we're trying to get weight loss, and it seems like they're doing most of the right things. They'll come in saying, well, I'm eating some veggies, I'm exercising, do that. But we do a little fine tuning, and all of a sudden there's results where there weren't before. For example, I'll have somebody that perhaps will walk on the treadmill every day, and they're wondering why they're gaining weight. But then we figure out, okay, their body's going to need some different intensities and some different types of exercise. We go there and suddenly there's results. So if that makes sense, you just got to get the right mix for your genes. It's not that your genes are bad. There are no bad genes.
I like that. I like that as just a mantra for life. You know, there are no bad genes. There's just bad ways to treat your genes.
There you go, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's about all we have time for today, but I want to thank you, and I want to invite you to subscribe to Psychetruth so that you can see more of our future videos. We'll be continuing this conversation about health and how to get the most out of exercise. If you want to learn more about Vincent Bellonzi and his new book, Health Recklessly Abandoned, then you can look in the description below. We will have a link. You can also find it on Amazon or any of your favorite booksellers. I look forward to seeing you again next time. I hope that you will like this video and share it with your friends. And I want to thank you for watching.